Strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America.
Since times before recorded history, men have pondered the true nature of their home. What is the Earth? How big is it? How deep does it go? What is our place among the stars? These questions inspired inquiry and myth as we sought to understand our destiny in the universe. This documentary will explain different theories throughout the ages about the nature of our planet. It will explain how our current understanding of the heliocentric globe came into popular science and became accepted almost universally. And it will provide the alternative theories of what the true nature of our world is that are gaining a lot of notoriety today. This documentary does not have all the answers, and much remains to be discovered, but hopefully it will begin a dialogue and inspire the next generation of fearless explorers that will go forth to expand our horizons. The ancient Greek poet Homer thought the world was a flat round disk. The lands of the earth, he speculated, were surrounded by okeanos, or the world sea. He believed that the stars, the moon, and the sun moved along the physical dome of the heavens that surrounded the earth. They would come up from the waters of the world sea, journey across the sky, and sink back into the world sea at the end of the cycle. He believed the earth was motionless, and that while it stood still at the center of the universe, the heavenly bodies moved around it. Homer also described a world beneath the earth known as Hades. This was the Greek underworld, where the Greeks believed they were destined to go after their death. For the Greeks, the underworld was very much a real physical place that had an entrance and through which rivers that could be seen on the surface world also flow, among them the river Styx. In short, Homer believed in a flat, motionless, hollow world. The Greeks were not the only ones that believed in an underworld. Ancient Celtic tribes told stories of heroes who entered the hollow earth world through ancient burial mounds and caves. The ancient Norse similarly described the underworld as being under the earth. They called it Hell, a word later borrowed by the Christians. The Norse hollow earth was described among other things as a region of mist, as well as a region of sunny, fertile lands. Tibetan Buddhists believe that an entire city exists inside the earth, known as Shambhala or Shangri-La. In Judeo-Christian texts, beneath the surface world, a hell also known as Sheol exists. In these texts, the hollow earth is described as fiery rivers of torture and torment. The Genesis story in the Torah describes the creation of the world, where there was a body of water which God hovered over before creating the firmament or the surface world on top of it. This is what Christians, Jews, and Muslims believe. The Judeo-Christian story of Genesis described a flat, hollow earth which is motionless, around which the heavens or the celestial bodies move. Similarly to the biblical account of creation, the Greek philosopher Thales speculated that the earth floated on water like a log of wood. One of the contemporaries of Thales, Anaximander, philosophized that the earth is a cylinder and that we live on the flat part on top of it. Yet another Greek philosopher from the same era, Anaximenes of Miletus, agreed with Thales that the earth was a flat disk, but stated that instead of water, it floated on air. Xenophanes, like Anaximander, believed we live on top of a cylinder, but added that the earth beneath us extends unendingly down. In 1692, Edmund Halley based the theory on Isaac Newton's new discovery of Earth's density. Halley theorized that if the Earth had the density that Isaac Newton attributed to it, then it must certainly be hollow on the inside. He thought that inside the Earth there must be multiple levels of hollow Earth, and that each level rotated at different speeds. He also speculated that hollow Earth must be inhabited by dwellers who live there. To explain the underworld civilizations, he claimed that wherever you go, nature is always teeming with life, and said, quote, "The concave arches may in several places shine with such a substance as invests the surface of the sun." This explained how the underworld dwellers had a source of sunlight. Halley was and still is one of the most famous scientists who has ever lived, with massive contributions to astronomy. While school children the world over learn his revolutionary discoveries, his theories on Hollow Earth are seldom mentioned, and always kept out of the textbooks. Expanding on the theories of Isaac Newton and Edmund Halley, the most influential mathematician who has ever lived, Leonhard Euler, added that the hollow Earth must have its own entire sun. This man introduced most of our modern mathematical terminology and notation. He was a physicist, astronomer, logician, and engineer, and besides laying the groundwork for how we still do math today, he influenced the fields of mechanics, fluid dynamics, optics, as well as music theory. But just as in the case of Halley, his work on the field of hollow Earth is almost never mentioned and perpetually kept out of the textbooks. In 1818, John Cleves Jr., an American Army officer, trader, and lecturer who was also known as the Newton of the West, expanded our understanding of Hollow Earth by figuring out that the entrances to Hollow Earth lay at the poles of the world. He said, quote, "I declare the Earth is hollow and habitable within, containing a number of solid concentric spheres, one within the other, and that it is open at the poles 12 or 16 degrees. I pledge my life in support of this truth, and am ready to explore the hollow if the world will support and aid me in the undertaking." However, the elites did not want this information to gain traction, and John was never given the support needed to set out to explore the hollow Earth. In fact, he was most likely even financially sabotaged, because when he died on May 28, 1829, he left his family in considerable debt. Once again, the hollow Earth knowledge was suppressed and minimized. In 1869, a doctor of upstate New York put forward a working model of a concave hollow Earth. His theory was that we already exist inside the hollow Earth, and in every direction around our Earth shell is solid dirt and rock. When we look up, we see the sky, the planets, and the stars because they are in the center of his concave hollow Earth model. He claimed this knowledge was given to him by divinity, and he changed his name to Koresh and became the religious messiah of the Koreshanity religion. This movement disappeared mysteriously after his death, and while most say that the membership declined because of the loss of Koresh, others speculate they were disappeared by those who do not want the information of Hollow Earth becoming public knowledge. Even a more mysterious theory suggests that the group found a way to the surface level of Earth. You won't find any hollow or flat Earth theories in the classroom, despite all these religions, philosophers, scientists, astronomers, and mathematicians who have supported these models of reality. Even the geocentric motionless Earth theory is introduced only very briefly, and with the conclusion that it is completely wrong, and that the debate about its legitimacy has been settled as false long ago.
Take everybody who thinks Earth is flat and launch them into space.
There you go.
And then wonder whether we got budget to bring them back, right? Send them around Earth a few times, and then only when the last of them agrees do we then agree to bring them back.
So what is it that popular science indoctrinates us to believe in the classrooms? Public schools, universities, television networks, and NASA are all there to protect their monopoly on the truth and to wage a war of misinformation in order to do so. They do not want questioning, inquisitive explorers, but obedient sheep, eagerly listening and regurgitating their programming back into the mouths of their offspring. They want you to believe that the Earth is a globe, where the continents and oceans surround it, while the poles are sheets of ice that are caps on the top and bottom of it. This globe Earth they propose also moves all the time in many directions. It supposedly spins on its own invisible axis, while revolving around the sun, while at the same time the Earth, Sun, and the rest of the solar system orbits the center of the Milky Way galaxy. This is what they force feed the population of the world. This is their elaborate answer to our place in the universe. We're just another floating rock, nothing special, a random planet orbiting a very common medium-type sun, in an endless sea of other planets and suns, floating in nothingness, unimaginably far from one another. Humanity is reduced to the significance of germs in a cosmic petri dish. How did these ideas take over the social consciousness of humanity? Where did they come from? Borrowing false teachings of Islamic scholar Aristarchus of Samos, the European astronomer Nicholas Copernicus proposed the stolen heliocentric theory as his own. It stated that the Earth was not motionless and was not the center of the universe. In the heliocentric model, the Earth revolved around the sun. These ideas directly contradicted the divine doctrine of the Bible, and were thus rejected by the authorities of the day. After the death of Copernicus, the heliocentric theory found another champion to take on its cause. Galileo, an Italian fraudster who falsely claimed to have invented the telescope after stealing the idea in a bid for fame and fortune, sought out to try and prove he was smarter than God himself by becoming a proponent of heliocentrism. When the Vatican got word about his blasphemy, they knew these ideas were obviously false and evil twistings of God's truth. They knew from reading the scripture, God's universe looked nothing like this. The Bible said in 1 Chronicles 16:30, "The world also shall be stable, that it be not moved." Psalms 104:5, "The Lord who laid the foundation of the earth, that it should not be moved forever." Ecclesiastes 1:5, "The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose." Galileo obviously contradicted the Holy Bible, the word of the one true God. God's and Galileo's models of the solar system contradicted each other. They both could not be right. Either God was right or Galileo was. The Catholic Church decided to settle this dispute once and for all, through democracy. The Vatican took a vote and unanimously stated that the geocentric solar system was the only true model of the heavens. They outlawed the heliocentric idea as outrageous heresy, labeled Galileo rightfully as a heretic, and leniently sentenced Galileo to house arrest, under which he died on January the 8th, 1642. However, as the European Renaissance continued, heliocentrism continued to resurface. Scientists wanted their authority to surpass the authority of God. Thus, they abandoned God's truth and began teaching heliocentrism in order to undermine God's divine authority. This also allowed them to keep the masses ignorant, so that they could themselves keep the truth hidden and secret. This inevitably caused a great chasm between God and science. As scientists became bolder in their blasphemies, the English naturalist named Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species in 1859 to propose his heretical theory of evolution, a theory that states we came from monkeys and were not created in the image of God. The God-hating European secular elites put all their effort and funding into promoting the globe, heliocentrism, and evolution until it became accepted fact, and today, in almost every corner of the earth, these ideas shape the worldviews of the entire population. In fact, if people hear anyone today claim that they reject the lies of the globe, heliocentrism, or evolution, they will assume you're some sort of idiot simpleton who is doubting an obvious truth in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. When in reality they are raised into this ideology, completely indoctrinated by their parents, school, government, and pop culture, and now it's almost impossible for them to break their programming. In 1927, George Lemaitre, a priest of the now corrupted Roman Catholic Church, who was also a physicist, astronomer, and mathematician, put forward his theory known as the Big Bang. His theory stated that the entire expansion of the universe could be traced back to a singularity which blew up space into existence, which occurred billions and billions of years ago. His idea that everything came into existence out of nothing quite literally spat in the face of God as it was uttered by his heretical mouth. The Bible clearly states that in the beginning there was a God who hovered over water, and those waters were the waters that would eventually become the earth. Also, the Bible's genealogy could easily be added up to prove that the first person to exist, Adam, who was created just a week after the creation of everything else, was born roughly 6,000 years ago. Not billions and billions of years ago. This theory directly contradicts God's perfect word of Scripture, and therefore cannot be accurate regardless of what evidence popular science tries to throw at us in order to confuse us and undermine God's truth.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Columbia, this is Houston, AOS, over.
Houston, Columbia on the high gain, over.
Roger, the EVA is progressing beautifully. They're setting up the flag now. I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
The NASA propaganda machine invaded our living rooms with their sci-fi masterpiece called The Moon Landing, and spammed our schools with doctored and artistically rendered images of Earth and space. Hundreds of thousands of NASA propagandists took an oath to keep the lies with them into the grave, and more misinformation was forcefully regurgitated into the eyes and ears of the masses. The secular elites monopolized the truth. At the turn of the 21st century, countries outside the Western world sought to industrialize, and the secular elites knew they were once again vulnerable in losing their monopoly on the truth. They then added another myth to their brainwashing educational system, the myth of global warming. After losing the presidential election, Al Gore introduced the myth to the population. The scientific community started madly funding anyone who would do research in support of this, and in just a few years, it became the new scientific gospel.
I'm open to all sorts of new ideas, maybe better ideas, to make sure that we deal with climate change in a way that promotes jobs and growth. Nobody has a monopoly on what is a very hard problem, but I don't have much patience for anyone who denies that this challenge is real. We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society. Sticking your head in the sand might make you feel safer, but it's not going to protect you from the coming storm.
The nations who sought to industrialize were then told they were going to make the global warming crisis worse if they developed, and thus were forbidden from becoming competitors with the Western secular elites. The lie was now complete. The Western secular elites were in control. But what were they hiding from the population? How did it benefit them to undermine God's authority? How did it benefit them to keep the masses ignorant? To find the answers to these questions, we need to figure out what the true reality of our world is. In the age of social media, the big globe lie became harder to keep. Intellectuals around the disk were able to share ideas and document the truth and the lies. Curtains slowly started lifting. The curvature or lack thereof was measured, and the sci-fi-like photos of NASA were exposed as Photoshop hoaxes. In the Bible, there is a story of a tower so tall it nearly reached heaven, the Tower of Babel. God would not allow this and cursed the people to all speak different languages in order to stop them from finishing its construction. Do you really think God changed his mind about men artificially entering heaven? No, God would never do that. His nature, his very essence, is unchanging perfection. A structure can never be built as high as the literal moon, or even to reach space itself for that matter. So we can safely conclude that if the Tower of Babel was going to be tall enough to reach heaven, and God disallowed men to artificially enter heaven, and that no structure including the Tower of Babel was as tall as space, Thus, NASA never went to the moon or space, because even if they could, and they couldn't, God would not allow it. NASA is a hoax, ladies and gentlemen. It's all Photoshop, green screen, CGI, and good old sleight of hand. It's all an illusion. At this point in America, at least 14% of the entire population is awake to the truth that the Earth is not what popular science claims it to be. As international summits gather and information is put in the hands of the people, more and more become woke. We have so far been able to figure out that the known mapped Earth is mostly flat. It is a disk with very slight curvature, like a contact lens. Around this disk is Antarctica, which forms an ice wall that surrounds all of the known lands. In the middle of the disk is the North Pole. Just like God revealed to us in the Bible, the Earth does not move, but instead stays still while the planets, stars, and the moon move around it. Even a fool can tell you that if the Earth was spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, like popular science claims, within just a split second, all structures ever built would be blown away along with their foundations. Just think of the last time you were in 50-mile-an-hour winds. Now imagine 1,000-mile-an-hour winds. See how this idea that the Earth moves is just ludicrous? We have in just the last couple of years uncovered so much. This, however, is hardly the whole picture. The question remains, what is beyond the ice wall of Antarctica? This seems to be the question that the secular elites are trying to cover up the most. The answer to this question is the key to figuring out what they are hiding. Beyond Antarctica, there are new continents for which we do not have maps yet. On these hidden lands, there are resources and other forms of life, perhaps even entire civilizations that the secular elites want a monopoly on. Also, there may be multiple levels of new lands and new Antarctic walls. We just do not as of yet know. Once we document the rest of these lands, we will finally know whether the entire Earth is a long, mostly flat disk, or a much bigger, motionless globe where the current Earth is just mostly a flat cap on top of it. Scholars have also stumbled on proof that there are hidden new lands past the North Pole that the secular elites are concealing. Many ancient cultures knew of the underworld, and now we know its entrance is at the center of the North Pole. There's an entire world under our feet inside the hollow Earth.
These are the days when, by buying a ticket on a commercial airliner, you can fly across the North Pole and drink a cocktail at the same time. Yet only 60 or more years ago, about 35 years ago, our guest tonight found out whether there was any land north of the North American continent. He made that first discovery flight, and I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
That's a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Admiral Byrd, one of the most decorated officers in the history of the US Navy, found this entrance. In the inner Earth, there are oceans, continents, and possibly advanced civilizations. Very likely, inside the hollow Earth, there is another sun to form its ecosystem. There are also multiple layers of hollow Earth, at least 3, one of which is Hell or Hades. The secular elites also for now hold a monopoly on these lands and their resources, but not for long. The cat is out of the bag, and it's only a matter of time before we fill in the blanks. It's only a matter of time before we find out the full truth. It's time to wake up. to get informed, and to spread this information to anyone willing to listen. We can only win if the majority of the population wakes up to the lies. Please share this video and mirror it. The secular elites are fighting us tooth and nail, and currently YouTube is blacklisting any video that challenges the idea that the Earth is not a spinning globe. We are in the middle of a war, ladies and gentlemen.
I came knocking on your door 1,000,000 times, and you laughed at me. You've been in love with something else your whole life, and this is a love affair. And so, I'm not going to get in bed with you. Because you don't love the spirit of justice. You love your father, the devil. You love death more than life. So you go with your father forever. And that's hell. Separation from God.
Thank you for watching, and please support this channel by subscribing for more documentaries to come. I would also like to issue a challenge to the secularists who hate God, His authority, and truth, especially Simon Dan, to prove me wrong. I have laid out my case for God's truth carefully and meticulously. I dare you to find a single error in this film. If you're a fan of Simon Dan, let him know the challenge has been issued.